you have done just, I think, just kind of out of curiosity, went on this deep data dive regarding Zion Williamson. So, explain kind of what your fact finding mission was here.
Yeah, I was excited to watch NBA when it started, and I think the Pelicans opened against the Brooklyn Nets. And after the game, when they asked KD about how awesome Zion is and who he would compare him to, he really struggled. He struggled to find comparison. So he threw out the names like Rodney Rogers or Jason Maxill, these like short, thick bodies, but not as explosive. Then he talked about Charles Barkley. And because he struggled, I started to think, okay, so who are Zion comps? Yeah. So in my view, some of the guys that I first thought was, let's say, peak Larry Johnson, grandma, who was like very small, thick, athletic. Then the guys like, I don't know, Sean Kemp, Blake Griffin, but they're taller than Zion and not as thick, not as, let's say, not as heavy. So it was really difficult to figure out.
2 C's.
Yeah. So it was difficult there to figure out the comp. So then I started to see, okay, one way to look at it, how to find the proper comp for Zion is obviously body type. And here are like guys that are similar weight and height. So we started to look at the body mass index, which is basically a correlation between height and body mass. And there, I think Zion is in top 20 all time in body mass index based on his height and his weight. Yeah. And it's difficult to find out even what is his actual weight. I used for my calculation what he was listed last year as 284 or something like that. Although they say that he was way above 300. So I don't know about that.
And he's definitely way closer to that now.
Exactly. So that's why
I'll say 284 for him is more accurate than 230 for Luka, I think.
Okay, but even with 284, so this was the number that I used in my comps, he was up there in top 20. So then, like I said, Jason Maxill, these guys, T guys, or I don't know, Oliver Miller, if you remember, big Glenn Baby Davis, they were like these high body BMI guys, but none was as explosive. So let's say, okay, let's try to figure out who are the explosive guys. But then I tried to, with some people in analytic community, how do you measure explosiveness? Because even now with tracking data, it's not as easy. So I started to think, and the first thing that came to mind is what is the most explosive movement in basketball, and it's a dunk, right?
Right.
So I started to look data back till 96 season when NBA started officially tracking dunks. Your buddy Kevin Pelton told me there was people who tracked it manually before in almanacs, but I couldn't get hands to that. So I started from 96. Who are the people that were top 10 in dunk, shot profile, because they started to measure that as well in 96. So average distance. And what you figure out when you look at Zion is basically that he drives or he attacks the basket like a guard.
Yeah.
I think from 2013, when the Second Spectrum tracks drives, he's by far the most driving big man. So if you reduce guards in the NBA, this was his 2021 season. But then his shot profile is that of a center. His average shot distance is 3.5 feet from the basket. And so he's like baby Shaq. I think Seth Partnow did analysis of these shots at the basket. To look at this combination, so who are the guys, let's say, that are heavier than 250 pounds and they had more than 100 dunks in one season, because Zion had 120 in 2020-21 season. And it was like only a few of guys like LeBron James, Blake Griffin, Ben Adebayo, Derek Favors, Jabari Parker, Zion, Terrence Jones, guys like that. If you raise the weight to 280 and 100 dunks, only two people remain, and these were Zion and Jahidi White. I don't know if you remember Jahidi White. He was a center,
he's easily forgettable, right? And obviously
Wizards.
Shaq, this is because this data goes before Shaq, or I'm sorry, it doesn't count Shaq's prime.
Yeah, no, it did. Shaq came into the comparison when we took shot distance, but here I was checking which guys were shorter than 6'9" and heavier than 250 and dunked at least 100 times. So this was only these two guys, Zion and Jahidi White, remained. And then when we added, for example, people with body mass index about 28, which is, let's say, quite thick, and more than 100 dunks. Then we had like Dwight Howard, Shaq, and Andrew Drummond, Derek Favors, Eddie Curry, Andrew Bynum, Brook Lopez, and J.D. White. So these were some of the people. And then as you look at this list, a lot of these guys ended there primarily because of injuries, because of the stress of their game and on their body. So this is where I connected to Jeff's thoughts from, In Street Clothes, is the NBA injury encyclopedia. So we did an expanded list of these explosive guys that had a lot of dunks, a lot of, let's say, shots close to the basket. And we checked the injuries for more than, like, I think there at the end was 70 or 60 players in the comparison. And what it popped out, that there were some guys that had like 2 injuries, major injuries, and by major we classified surgery, like Zion had by age 23. And so these were like, of these guys from this list, only Jabari Parker, Andrew Bynum, Amaris Stoudemire, Jamar McGlure, Nerlens Noel, Blake Griffin, and Ben Simmons and Zion were in this list.
And that's concerning. That's concerning because you're talking about a lot of guys who, of that group, I would say Blake's had the best career, and he had a great career. He's still playing, but he had a great prime run. But his game also changed a lot during that run. He became less and less reliant on athleticism as he went, and he did have injury issues throughout his career. Ben Simmons, we'll see.
You see now. You see yesterday.
He came back last night. He was on a minutes restriction of 20 minutes. He only played 16 because he wasn't helping him. And he hasn't moved the same coming off of that back surgery. And Zion, the whole reason you delved into this thing is because Zion is so unique. I mean, to me, Barkley is the best comp for him because he's the only guy that I've seen who is, he was the round mound to rebound, but like you go back to young Barkley, he was so explosive. And, he's the only other guy really on that list who, could grab it, could go, could be a one-man fast break. You could, just get him the ball and let him attack. I mean, he was dunking on people. He was this athletic specimen who, looked like he could play offensive lineman. And that Zion, he's also the one guy on that list. He wouldn't fit there because he didn't have the early career surgeries.
Yeah, exactly. Because when we were looking at this, so I looked also when the guys on the list who had the second major injury then by age 28. And this is when guys like Brook Lopez, Antonio McDyess, Eddie Curry, Nene, Dwight Howard gets in the picture, and everybody by that second major injury declined. So the guys who are really explosive, but not fitting, let's say, the body mass index, the thickness index, LeBron, Giannis, Barkley, Shaq, none of these guys had any major injuries until age 30. So this is when you say maybe this type of a game is not sustainable. And what you mentioned with, let's say, with Blake is what we see in these other guys that adapted, that stayed in the league. Brook Lopez is similar. So as they declined, their average shot distance increased dramatically. So they adapted their game. They started to shoot. And this is where Ben Simmons currently struggles. And I think Zion will slowly, throughout his career, probably needs to adapt his game a little bit.